Hello everyone. On this video we will be looking at the graph and equation of a circle. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the actual definition of a circle. Okay, a circle is a set of all points on a plane that are a fixed distance, and that distance we have as r. That's a fixed distance from the center. Okay, so this little drawing here is kind of a mini idea of a circle. So if you have that center, which is HK, the radius is a certain distance, and if you spin that radius around, every point on that circle will be the same distance from the center. Okay, so now we're going to look at the two equations of a circle. Well, the two types of equations. You have your general equation, which is x squared plus y squared plus dx plus e plus f, where you know d, e, and f are just constants. And you have your standard form of a circle, which is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals your radius squared. Okay, we know our center is hk, which are those two values there. And our radius is our r. Alright, so now we're going to look at the steps to convert from the general form to your standard form. Right, there we go. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, you want to bring your x and y terms together. Then factor out any greatest common factors if necessary. I'll show you all of these on the example step by step. Okay. The next thing you want to do is you want to complete the square for both the two x terms and the two y terms. Now the constant, which is your f value here, you just put that on the other side. So you have all of those values and you have plus 5, you just subtract 5 from both sides. Okay, now your third step, you want to convert them to a two perfect square trinomials if it's more than one. And once you do that, then you can identify your center and your radius if you have to. Alright. Okay, so if you're still writing, by all means, feel free to press pause. But we're going to go ahead and go to our first example. Let me slide this down here. There we go. Gotta focus that a little bit. There we go. So let's say, for example, we wanted to find the center and the radius for, say for problem A, you have x squared plus y squared. For problem B, you have x plus 4 squared plus y squared equals 1. And for problem C, you have x minus 1 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 19. Okay, so while you're writing those down, you want to remember that if it's in the form of x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, your center is hk and r is equal to your radius. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive into these. So for problem A, you have x squared plus y squared equals 64. Okay, but remember, you want to have it in this form. So all we have to do really is just rewrite it. Instead of x squared, you can make that x minus 0 squared. Same thing, x minus 0 is just x. And instead of y squared, you can make that y minus 0 squared. Okay. Now instead of 64, remember 64 is just 8 times 8. So you can make that 8 squared. Now once you rewrite it, you have everything you need. We know that h is equal to 0. We know that k is equal to 0. Because remember, it's x minus h and y minus k. And you have r squared. So here you have 8 squared. So we know that r is equal to 8. So we know that since our center is hk, we know it's 0, 0. And our radius, which is just r, that's 8. Okay, so that's your center and your radius. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to problem B. So you have x plus 4 squared plus y squared equals 1. Okay, so it's a couple of things you have to do on this one. Okay, notice this is minus. It has to be x minus h. So you have to rewrite this one. So instead of x plus 4, it has to be x minus negative 4 squared. Okay, so it has to match up with this one perfectly. So if you have a plus in your original, you have to make it minus and then just change it to negative, because minus, negative, well, same as plus. Okay, so plus, remember your y squared, that's just y minus 0 squared. And you have 1, you can just make that 1 squared. Okay, so just like before, we know that our h is equal to negative 4. Our k is equal to 0. And our radius, is equal to 1. Okay, so we know that our center, which is hk, is negative 4, 0. And our radius is equal to 1. Okay, so let's go ahead to problem C, which is x minus 1 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 19. Alright, so this is already x minus h. So this one can actually stay as x minus 1 squared. Plus, you have y plus 4. We want to make that minus. So you have y minus negative 4 squared equals, now 19 is not a perfect square, so we can't just do what we did with 64 and 1. But we can make 19 square root of 19 squared. Okay, so in this case, your h is equal to 1. Your k is equal to negative 4. And your r is equal to the square root of 19. Remember, square root of 19 squared is just 19. Okay, so we know that our center, which is our hk, is equal to 1, negative 4. And our radius is equal to the square root of 19. Okay, so those are just a few ways you may see that particular type of problem. Okay, So let's go ahead to our next example. And once again, if you're still writing, feel free to press pause. Okay. So let's say for this example, we want to identify the center and the radius for x squared plus y squared plus 6x minus 4y plus 12 equals 0. Okay, now this is in general form. We can't identify the center and radius when it's in general form, so we have to convert it to a standard form, which is what we just did before. Okay, so remember the very first page, we had our steps to convert from general to standard form. So remember your first step, you want to put your x terms together. You want to put your y terms together. And you want to move your constant. Okay, you can do all three of those at once. Okay, so putting your x terms together just means your x squared and your 6x, you're going to put them together. So you have x squared plus 6x. And putting your y terms together, you have y squared minus 4y, y squared minus 4y. Now plus 12, you're going to subtract 12 from both sides. That's going to equal negative 12. Okay, so that's your first step. That's all it is to it. Okay, so now for your second step, you're just going to complete the square for your x terms and your y terms. So for your second step, you're going to complete the square. So I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite it. X squared plus 6x plus y squared minus 4y equals negative 12. Okay, now to complete the square, I'm just going to draw a little dotted line down the middle. Remember, completing the square is b divided by 2a squared, or b divided by 2 squared, considering that a is equal to 1. Okay, so this completing the square, remember here that b is equal to 6 and a is equal to 1. Move that down just a little bit. Okay, so we know that b divided by 2a squared is just 6 divided by 2 times 1 squared, which is equal to 3 squared. You want to remember that value, and 3 squared is equal to 9. But remember, you want to remember that 3. Okay, so we do the same thing here, where a is equal to 1 and b is equal to negative 4. Alright, so again, completing the square, we have b divided by 2a squared, which is negative 4 divided by 2 times 1, which is 2 squared. So we have negative 2 squared. Again, you want to remember that, which is 4. Okay. Now, once you complete the square, those two values you want to add to both sides of the equal sign. Okay. So starting off with what we have here. You have x squared plus 6x plus 9 plus y squared minus 4y plus 4 equals negative 12. Now remember, you added a 9 and a 4 over here. So you have to add a 9 and a 4 over here. Okay, just to keep things even, you have to do the same thing to the left and the right side. Okay, so that brings us to our third step, which is a perfect square trinomial. So now you put this as a perfect square trinomial, and these three terms as a perfect square trinomial. Okay, now for your x value, if you remember your 3, that's why I told you to remember that value before you apply the square. That becomes x plus 3 squared. Okay, plus, remember here you had that 4, but I told you to remember that negative 2. So that means these three terms become y minus 2 squared. Okay, so if you have those three, negative 12 plus 9 plus 4 is equal to 1. Okay, so that gives us x plus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 1. Now, if we want to find the center and the radius, we have to do a little bit of work here, because they have to be in x minus h. So that's x minus negative 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 1 squared. Okay, so that lets us know that our h is equal to negative 3, our k is equal to 2, and our radius is equal to 1. Okay, so we know that our center, which is hk, becomes negative 3, 2. And our radius, which is r, is equal to 1. Alright. Okay, so if you're still writing, by all means, feel free to press pause. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our next example. Let me straighten that out. There we go. Oops, I actually think I... Oh, here we go. I actually had another example here that I had no... There we go. Okay, now for this example, we want to find the equation of a circle in standard form when, say A, our center is 5, 3, and our radius is 2. And for B, say the center is the origin and the diameter is 8 square root of 3. So it's a little bit tricky on this one. Okay. Now when they give you the center and the radius, it's not so bad. Because remember, it's in the form x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals your radius squared. Okay, that's your standard form. So for problem A, we know that the center is 5, 3. Remember, that's your h, and that's your k. And your radius is equal to 2. So if we plug those in to that formula right here, we have x minus h, so x minus 5 squared, plus y minus k, so y minus 3 squared, equals your radius squared, so that's 2 squared. So that gives us x minus 5 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 4. Okay, so that's our equation of the circle for problem A. Okay, so let's move on to problem B. Now, whenever you see center at the origin, all that means is that the center equals 0, 0. Okay. So center at the origin is just a fancy way to say 0, 0. Where, of course, that's your H and that's your K. Okay. Now on this one, they gave you the diameter. So we have to kind of go back a little bit. So if you remember, that your radius is equal to your diameter divided by 2. Okay, so kind of going back a little bit, some older math. So your radius will equal 8 square root of 3 divided by 2. Now 8 divided by 2 is 4, so your radius will equal 4 square root of 3. Okay, so we have our center and we have our radius. So just like before, just go ahead and plug everything in. So you have your x minus h. So x minus h is 0 squared plus y minus k, y minus 0 squared, is equal to our radius squared, so 4 square root of 3 squared. Okay, so x minus 0 is just x. So we have x squared plus y minus 0 squared is just y. So you have y squared equals 4 square root of 3 squared. Kind of do that. So 4 square root of 3 squared is just 4 squared times square root of 3 squared. So 4 squared is 16 times square root of 3 squared is just 3. So that's equal to 48. So you have x squared plus y squared equals 48 as your standard form of the equation. Alright. So if you're still writing, feel free to press pause. But we're going to go ahead to our last example. Okay, so what if we wanted to write the standard form of the equation with a center at -1, -3, and they don't give us the radius, but it passes through the point -9, 2. Alright, now this one's a little bit different because we have to kind of go back to our distance formula. Okay, so remember your distance formula and that's d is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Now the thing is, if you have the center here and a point on your circle is there, the distance from the center to any point on the circle is your radius. Okay, so we just have to find the distance between the center and that point. Okay, so instead of the distance between the two, since that distance is the radius, we just use the radius is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, and just like before, we make our x1, y1 and x2, y2. So if you have your -1, -3, and you have your other point of -9, 2, you make this your x1, and this your y1, this your x2, and this your y2. Alright, so moving that up, you just go ahead and plug everything in. So your radius is going to equal the square root of x2 minus x1, so that's -9 minus -1 squared plus y2 minus y1, so that's 2 minus -3 squared. All right. So if we go ahead and simplify those, that's the square root. -9 minus negative is plus, so -9 plus 1 is -8, so that's -8 squared plus minus negative is plus, so 2 plus 3 is 5, so that's 5 squared. Okay, so that's going to equal the square root. -8 squared is 64 plus 5 squared is 25. So that's going to equal the square root of 89. Okay, so we see here that the radius is equal to the square root of 89. Okay, so now we have our radius, and they already gave us our center. So the center is -1, -3, where that's your h, and that's your k. Okay, so now we just go ahead and plug it all in. So x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to your radius squared. That will give us x minus h is x minus -1 squared plus y minus k is y minus -3 squared equal your radius squared, so that's square root of 89 squared. Okay, so right now we just have to go ahead and simplify those. So minus negative, that's plus, so that's x plus 1 squared plus, you have a minus negative, so that's plus, so y plus 3 squared. Square root of 89 squared is 89. Okay, so that's your formula with the center at -1, -3 that passes through the point -9, 2. All right, so hopefully this video has helped, and I will see you on the next video.